yes, welcome to my attic in my construction zone.
I love it.
Yeah. It kind of makes me think of like movies where it's set in Vietnam, but then they go into the general's tent and there's like candles lit and it's kind of nice. I feel like we're in this little oasis among a lot of pounding and drilling. And
I mean, I've been there, so I completely relate to the construction situation. Oh, this is what I dreaded. I look so bad right now.
You look so beautiful, as you always do.
There's a man trying to take a candid photo.
You could be in a sleeping bag and your personality would be bursting through the zipper.
I essentially am in a sleeping bag. I'm on the way to the barber shop to get my hair did.
You're getting your hair done.
Yeah.
What's that process like?
It's so many hours. It's so many people. It's so many hours to make me look exactly the same. No, I have a colorist who I love named Sean Metcalf, and but just to get brown.
They take you to platinum, then build you back up to brown.
Right. Exactly right. It's a lot of wiggery, and no, it just takes a long time, and I have to do it all the time.
And what is a long time? A couple hours?
Couple hours.
It is.
Yeah, and that's like without. This is. I hope. Can we just talk about hair the whole time?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's one of the main focuses of the podcast.
A hair podcast.
It was totally lacking in the marketplace.
Yes, that's true.
Although, now that I say that, I have to assume that Chaz whatever has a podcast.
Oh,
the guy
he
who
probably
owns,
does.
because he's got billboards everywhere.
Chaz Dean.
Do you know, I run into, he doesn't know me, but I run into Jeff, what's his name, who I love, who does that show, the Flipping Out show.
Okay.
What's his name?
I don't know. Jeff Bridges.
Yes, Jeff Bridges.
Jeff Bezos.
Yes.
Am I getting close?
I'm going to think of his last name.
Okay. But he has he's not friends with Chaz Dean, is he?
Chaz Dean is like a recurring character on this show because Jeff redoes his studio, and then for one reason or another, like once one burned down, once there was a flood, like it's almost like
he's riddled with
they're
bad
looking
luck.
for reasons to have Chaz Dean back on the show, so he just keeps redoing. I think he moved once, like he's always on the show.
Okay, so Chaz Dean, if you don't know, he makes a hair product. When?
Yes,
is that what it is? And I don't know if that's popular countrywide.
I think it is. They sell it on QVC and stuff. It's like a non-lathering shampoo thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a great product.
Yeah.
This is nothing to say
Are
anything
we being
about the
sponsored
product
right now?
Well, no. What we did is we just got rid of Pert being a sponsor. Oh. Because we're talking so much about Chaz Dean.
Was Pert a sponsor?
No, but we just got rid of that option.
Everyone's a possible sponsor.
But back to Chaz Dean. Yeah. He has a lot of billboards here in Los Angeles that just has his face on it.
Yeah.
It looks like me and Seth Green had a child.
Wow, that's kind of true.
He weirdly is like a cross-pollination of Seth Green and I.
But you're a cross-pollination of so many people.
Zach Braff,
yes,
clearly.
And whoever.
Yeah.
And
name like a stud.
I
find when people...
I think Zach Braff is studly.
Like Zach Braff and Brad Pitt.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is possible.
That's it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think that's nice,
Yeah. A big dose of creative and then legendary sex symbol status.
Sure.
Like
yeah. Wait, real quick. Chaz Dean, the billboards are more than just his face. You see his body, and he's wearing two vests or two ties or two jackets.
Yeah.
There's one thing that he's wearing two of, and it's so disturbing.
It's kind of like a riddle.
It is.
When you look at it at high speed, you got to think, like, what was he wearing two of? He had two glasses on, I think. No, he had two neckties.
But only in Los Angeles is there a possibility that your trainer, your hair person, may, in your lifetime, become more famous than you.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I've been bumped by makeup artists who are just too famous to do
You didn't make the cut anymore.
No.
The guy who I bought Kristen's engagement ring off of is now that. He's a national celebrity, and I think he's a spokesman for, like, K Jeweler or something.
Really?
Neil Lane.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know him?
Well,
everyone knows Neil
I don't know him
Lane.
personally, but that's not, like, the same thing. He was like a famous jeweler.
Yeah.
What do you mean you bought the ring off of him? It sounds like you pulled a guy over
I
on
met
the
him
side
behind
of the road.
Arby's.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's Arby's on Sunset.
Yeah,
in the alley.
Arby's on, like, Rodeo Drive. Neil Lane's got, like, a very swank situation.
I wasn't meaning to imply I discovered him. He certainly was an existing Beverly Hills fancy pants jeweler.
But now he has
commercials. Now he's nationwide.
But so do you. Yeah, but so are you.
Okay, so I guess I'm keeping pace with Neil Lane.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm in a shootout with Neil. But he's representing, a mall jewelry store now. right?
Yes.
Is that?
I think so. I think, yeah.
I've only been to a
Jewelers.
Yeah,
another sponsor.
Yes. Every wish becomes a K. I don't even know the words, but that's the jingle, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lauren, what's really fun about this is I often have friends on, and then I read about them, and then there's all this stuff that even in 10 years of friendship I had no idea about, and then it's kind of fun for me.
Uh-huh.
One of them is that you're born in Hawaii.
Correct.
This makes zero sense.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Because I think of you as a Virginian.
Yes. Well, I was mainly raised in Virginia, but the first couple of years were colorful. My dad took an aptitude test when he was in maybe the first year of law school, and the only language he'd ever taken was Latin. And for some reason, he responded to a sort of thing on a bulletin board, which was test your aptitude to learn Vietnamese. It's a very tonal, very complicated language. And he took this test and scored very high, and kind of put that together with, I'm sure, some feelings of, I don't know if it's guilt or, the Vietnam War was going on at the time. It was 1966. It was the height of everything. And he was in school and married, so he wasn't going to be drafted, but I think he felt compelled to help in some way. So he went to work for an organization called AID, which is Aid to Internationals in Distress, which is a division.
Wait, AID?
Yes.
That became unfortunate.
Became something else.
AIDS.
Yes, that's
I was
right.
wait, he started an umbrella company, Herpes. You got to remember, this was long before herpes was discovered.
Yes, so it was. Well, it's that maybe why they refer to it as AID and not AID. But
he went to the sunglass company, sickle cell anemia. They were the most fashionable sunglasses.
That reminds me, for some reason, of one of my favorite stories about Matthew Perry, which I can never tell properly. But I did a movie with Greg Kinnear about the guy who invented the intermittent windshield wiper.
Yes,
right.
That our friend directed.
Flash of Genius, that our friend directed. Yeah. Mark Abraham, who I love. I had also done a movie with Matthew that year, and we were both in Sundance. So we did our press together, and every time somebody would ask me about the movie, about the guy who invented the intermittent windshield wiper, and then they'd say to Matthew, what are you working on? He's like, it's so weird, because I'm working on, then that little hole on that you put your shoelace through on the shoe? It's the guy who invented that. And throughout the day, he just kept making up more random things.
Boring.
Yes, that's right.
Biopic,
yes.
First human to ever yawn.
Oh my God! But it's one of those things that it's so particular to his sense of humor. But I must think of it once a week. I laughed so hard, and that's what sickle cell anemia
is
making me think of. Yes, yes. So anyway, my dad went to Vietnam, but on his way, he had a 3-month intensive language school in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Because the Navy was doing it? Is that why? Because there's a Navy base there, obviously, right?
I
Pearl
don't
Harbor.
know why there in particular wasn't, AID...
Was it military related, though?
Well, AID is an offshoot of the CIA, which over the years, I know, and there were some embedded spies, which is another thing that to me is hilarious, because my father is well known for, putting, cameras and coffee mugs and glasses on top of the car and driving away, and I never owned a house key because everybody lost their keys all the time, so we just we'd leave the cars open, we'd leave the door open. So the idea that
he would have been
it could be a sitcom on ABC. It's the most forgetful guy in America is also their top spy. By the way, sold.
Yeah, I'm in.
So that's why I was born in Hawaii. But I was only there for 3 weeks, and then my dad left for Vietnam, and my mom and I went back to Japan, which is where she had lived for many, many years.
Her parents were missionaries?
Yes, her parents were missionaries.
That sounds like it's out of a 18th century storybook. Yes. That doesn't sound possible.
They were pioneers, and there weren't many people trying to convert the Japanese into being Southern Baptist.
It's so weird. I know. It seems so.
And it didn't totally catch on, but my grandparents did start a church that still exists in Sendai, Japan.
Were they in any way related to the military? Because there was also all these people that stayed there after World War II, right? There's a huge...
Right, but no, it was just part of the Baptist church outreach.
My grandparents were Southern Baptists.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Even though we were in Michigan, they still were Southern Baptists, and my brother and I went. And the only thing that made it tolerable is that occasionally you got to yell amen.
Right.
Right. It was always very delayed. Like, we would wait for a few adults to do it, and then my brother and I would do it, and then my Papa Bob would, like, pinch us really hard and stop us from saying, because once we started the amens, almost any sentence warranted an amen, in our opinion.
Well, I mainly grew up with my dad, who was raised Catholic, and my dad's, like, the quietest man. And the Catholic Church, you do not yell amen. So then I'd go and, my grandfather was also a pretty mellow guy, except when he was up preaching. And then he
fire and brimstone.
caught the spirit. And so...
He never spoke in tongues, did he?
No, he didn't.
Damn
no,
it.
I know. So close.
I'm looking for 1 degree of separation from someone who speaks in tongue.
Oh, I'm sure you can find them. You don't see that anymore.
It's just not as popular as you want. And I hate that it's relegated only to the church. I would love to be at the McDonald's drive-thru and the person's like, let me just read this back to you. That's a Big Mac with extra sauce, extra cheese.
What's the concept behind speaking in tongues again?
I think the Lord is speaking through you.
The Lord is speaking?
Again, I don't know fucking a thing about it. But luckily, Monica fact checks us.
Oh, really?
Because invariably, I'll spout a bunch of data that I learned 20 years ago, and so it's probably not correct.
Right.
And then
What data are you spouting, by the
just
way,
stick
of any
around.
kind?
I will be nailing you with, like, the distance between here and the sun, 93 million miles, or here and the moon, 180,000 miles.
Peter knows all that stuff.
Yeah, he and I often like to get in just a number off.
Yeah.
Where we'll just, he says a number and I respond with another number. But I do believe it is that the Lord is speaking through you. And then, of course, he doesn't speak English. He doesn't want to be...
so obvious.
He doesn't want to tip his hand to who he likes the most. I mean, I think it would be English.
Right.
Just given the tradition of it. But
it's an nonsensical language that we have left to us to decipher.
It's too powerful.
We already have that.
And Father, I bet your father would have tested really high phonetically.
Yes, exactly
speaking in tongues.
That part of the story in my own life has always been glossed over. Like, first of all, what is that test? That tests your ability to learn to speak Vietnamese
without knowing it.
Yeah.
Like, I guess there's noises that they make.
But I don't remember it being an oral test. But I've been to Vietnam with my dad. We did a bike trip there, and he can still speak. He speaks to the kids. Yeah, and people are shocked.
And what's interesting is I knew you had gone on that trip with your father because you did it in the hiatus of one of our seasons, like between 4 and 5 or something.
Yeah.
What was he doing there with his new Vietnamese?
So
I'm not even pronouncing that.
You're really
this is a word that Kristen always gets on me. I'm add something, right?
No, say it again.
Vietnamese. No. I'm adding a ma.
That's international coffee.
Oh.
Vietnamese.
Oh, okay.
Vietnamese.
Viet money.
No. It's an N, not an M.
Viet mayonnaise. Did I get it?
No.
Yeah, you're
perfect.
There.
It's great.
Clearly, I would have tested very poorly on the test. They would have not sent me.
They had supplies. They would help people rebuild. Peace Corps adjacent. But this is part of our trip. There was someone who was sitting in a park bench who probably just because we were Caucasian people and that was an unusual sight, yelled something. But I so wanted somebody to walk up to him and be like, Larry, you helped me that day. I wanted the movie version for him.
Of course.
And it was not that, but it was just.
Couldn't you have paid someone on the side?
I probably could have.
Yeah.
You would have staged a really great event.
Yeah, just got up an hour earlier than him.
Yeah, I know.
At the hotel and went downstairs.
He wouldn't have known the difference. He would have been like, yeah, Phil, of course I remember you.
Yes. And how long was he there?
He was there for about a year and a half, so that was the first year and a half of my life. Yes.
That's mind-boggling
to
me. Yeah.
Now, they were so young when they got married. They were 22 and 23, and I think the whole thing was a little bit of a improvised situation. Yeah. So I was with my grandmother, my mom.
Your mom's mom.
Yes.
And that's why she probably went to Japan because she wanted some help.
That's right.
Right.
And so, I lived for the first year and a half of my life in Tokyo. And then which, of course, you have no memory of, right? I feel like I do, but it's that thing where there are a few pictures of me from that time, and I maybe think... And I do remember, because they had a kind of a nanny to the kids, Sato-san, and I remember that presence. I remember that person taking care of me. So I feel like I have some sense of that time.
Yeah. But, and then you guys all meet back up in Virginia. Is that what happens?
Then my father came to Japan, and we... They took a ship back through Russia.
So what I'm very confused about, just geographically, and again, this is where Monocle will come in, but my understanding of where Japan is and where Moscow is, I have no idea how Moscow's on the way back.
Wow, I don't really either.
Like,
also,
did you guys take a train, the Trans-Siberian Railroad, to Moscow? Because it's very far east.
Maybe they were like, we're, reunited, let's sail around the world. I don't know. Also, I know that I got chicken pox.
Let's rekindle this romance in fucking Soviet Moscow.
Plus, I got chicken pox on the boat, and there are lots of stories of them going to dinner and stuff, like, on the boat, and I was like, wait, I had chicken pox, and I'm just like by myself, and in the
sleeping
thing,
it off.
They were like, she's probably fine. It's the 60s. She'll be okay.
Yeah, she needs a long nap. That'll take care of it. But it is curious, right? Because I accumulate all these stories, as you do, of things my parents did when I was young. And they made perfect sense until I'm now their age, or I'm now older than them. And they start to make zero sense to me. And that's got to be one of them. But I would imagine it's very peculiar from my point of view that you would take a year and a half off as newlyweds of the new baby, right? So do you think that was at all a clue as to what their relationship was like at that time?
Probably. I think it was also, and I mean this in the most kind way, I think my dad was just deeply freaked out.
Fuck yeah. When you're 22 and this is now... And we get closer and closer to exactly what that decision was, and sort of even how they came together. My dad's mother famously, when he came home and said, I'm getting married, she said, but Larry, you've never even had a girlfriend. Like, what do you, he played sports, he's extremely smart, and also my mother's a very special person, and he always says about her, like, just one in a million. He'd never met anybody like her, and I think it just knocked him over in any number of ways. And then, by the time he came back, she was ready to leave, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, they weren't together for very long. And that was in Virginia.
You really are dying to get us to Virginia, because
it's such an exotic place. Why would I want to talk about Japan or Russia or Vietnam when I could be talking about Virginia? So my mother fell off the boat and had to be ready. But I'm assuming she made it to Virginia, though, right? We don't need to know about the helicopter rescue or anything.
We lived first so the house I remember was in Southampton, in Long Island, because my dad's parents were in Long Island, and then I think they split up. And then we lived on a houseboat in the Virgin Islands.
My goodness. This is
just
one step away from Swiss Family Robinson.
I know.
Story. Yeah, inordinate amount of boats in your
I remember
background.
Living on the houseboat because I remember the feeling of being seasick. Like, it was a docked boat, kind of like where Crosby lived in Paris.
Yeah. I should have called your dad for research. Although I have to imagine the bachelor experience on a houseboat is drastically different than new family on a houseboat. That sounds like a nightmare.
We had a tiny boat, and he has, however old I was, it's not a
thinking
babe
you're going to
magnet.
fall in all the time.
I don't remember him ever worried about that.
Oh, that's how liberating for him.
I'm
we
sure
live on
he
land,
did.
and I'm nervous that they'll fall in the pool. I
was always pretty self-sufficient. I'm sure after the whole chickenpox thing, I'm sure they're like, she's fine.
Yeah, she's indomitable.
But I would get picked up for daycare or school or nursery school or whatever in a motorboat, in like a little
boat. This is so interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And then we kind of bounced around. We lived in Manhattan, and then my grandparents... Now we're back in the States and we're living in D.C. And I think partially because of that, and partially because he got a job working on Capitol Hill. That's when we moved to Georgetown. Didn't get there. Not there yet.
So close. We're so close.
And then we moved to Arlington, and then the rest of it was in Virginia. Woo! Northern Virginia.
Boy, do we love Virginia. Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert. Right, 5.
Yeah.
Your mom and dad get divorced.
Yeah.
And she moves to England.
Right.
Which, again, from my perspective now, that's a crazy choice.
Yeah. I always feel with my mom, she was kind of in the wrong time. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, she was not quite as traditional as someone who had grown up in the 50s, because she had all this exotic life experience, and she spoke a foreign language, she traveled, and she still had enough traditional sense that she wanted to get married, and then I think got there and was like, wait a minute, I don't even know who I am or what I want to do. So initially she was in art school in New York City. Then she had dabbled, tried to, get cast in summer stock. She had a sort of interest in acting, but she kind of didn't really stick with anything too much. And then I'm not sure if this was the first thing that brought her there, but she was in a series of pop bands.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was a backup singer with her best buddy in a band called Goddess.
Okay.
And this is now England in the 80s. And I do have very strong memories of going to visit her during that time when she was trying to get this music career going. And I went with her to a couple of rehearsals and meetings, and it was very daunting. It was kind of scary, I have to say.
How interesting that you would have witnessed that and then still chose to put yourself in that situation where you're basically...
Watching her go through what she went through gave me a healthy suspicion, I guess, about people in that business. I remember sitting in on a meeting with her, and I for whatever reason, I remember thinking, this guy is lying. This is not a truthful person. Yeah. And she was more gullible and more hopeful. And
you can be very much blinded, by your dream, and you start ignoring some pretty big signs.
And she had such a kind of, if you dream it, it will come kind of vision. And so I always believed for her that it would. That some magical, because she was incredibly stunning, like in a way that even as a teenager, men are whistling on the street at her. You know what I mean? I'm the teenager. Yeah. She had she carried herself in this incredibly elegant way, and she was just this very striking person. So that combined with her intelligence and her kind of vision for herself, I always thought, I thought her dreams will come true.
Right, because she has all the things.
She has everything
required of that. Did she do Course in Miracles or any of those things?
No, she was much more, she's a funny combination of, she was very intellectual, but then I guess maybe had a sense, it was her interpretation of all the religion she'd grown up with, I think was just this, there was she didn't quite embrace what had been taught to her, but I think she did believe in something. Yeah. And it was a very painful on many levels realization when she passed away without any of those things coming true. And it was a real shock to me, and it served, I already was sort of starting to work before that, but I have never believed if you dream it, it will come. You know what I mean? You hustle and work for everything you get.
We have that in common. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear a lot of actors on, in interviews saying that they just knew it would happen or whatever. And I'm virtually the opposite. I'm like, it won't happen, but I'm going to do all the steps required so I have no regrets.
Right.
But suffice to say, you had I think we had a kind of a similar, my dad left when I was 3. Mm-hmm. He didn't move to England, but he moved into a bar virtually. And then he died very young at 62. And I've had this whole full circle feeling about him. I can explain a lot of my isms based on him, yet I've come to love him. I give him too much blame than he deserves. It's all a messy mix. I love him, but it was definitely my big relationship to fix and confront my whole life. Is that what your mother and yours was? Did you take it personally when she left England? To me, that feels
I'm sure I did. Yeah. I'm sure I did. I don't remember that necessarily, but as a young adult, I felt really clear that I probably was not going to get an answer from her that would fix or change anything, and that what I wanted was for us to have as good a relationship as we possibly could, and that meant I had to readjust.
Right. So were you the adult in the relationship? That sounds like the adult kind of response to it, not the
Well, I did go through a time, I went through a couple of years when we really didn't speak. A couple of years in college, I just didn't see her and didn't really speak to her. In my family, people don't raise their voices, really. There was never a confrontation. There was never a fight. There was never there's never any of that. I just kind of took a few years, I feel like, to figure out where I was.
And you're super close to your dad, right?
I'm super close to my dad.
So some of my stuff was just, I'm so in love with my mother that however mad I was about my own personal stake in it, I really was mad at him for her. You know, like she was a single mother raising us, and he wasn't participating in a way I thought he should, and financially or time-wise. So I was just so mad that he could have treated this woman who's my number one that way. It wasn't till later where I started owning my own, like, well, yeah, now I'm mad about me, you know?
Right. Well, my mom also was diagnosed with cancer pretty young. For the first time when she was around 50.
Breast cancer?
Mm-hmm. And she had my half-sister, who's 15 years younger than I am, and that was like an instant bond. So my trips became less about anything except being friends with my sister, taking care of her when she was really little. And my mother's first diagnosed with cancer, my sister kind of turned to me and started getting, sent to spend the summer with me, or, hang out, come visit me at work or something. And that also, I think, made the perspective shift. There was not going to be a whole bunch of time to work this out, and it just sort of adjusted everything.
How often were you going to see her?
Like once a year.
Once a
year, twice a year maybe. And also my dad was always really respectful of her. They always were friends. They really, you could see until the end. Occasionally, this didn't happen very often, but the three of us would go to dinner. They couldn't stop talking to one another. They had so much to say, and so many common interests and books they were talking. There was such electricity, intellectually. So she just
did you ever think like, oh wow, had these people met at 30?
Yes, for sure.
They could have really been
for sure.
Yeah.
I just think they were overwhelmed. She could probably have found what she wanted to do with her life within that relationship, within being a mom. She didn't think so.
Yeah, I was 38 when I had Lincoln, and we have help, and we have money. We don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. And it is still almost push you to the breaking point. I just can't imagine being 20. So again, having kids and looking back, it's like, well, what the fuck did I expect of my 24-year-old dad who now had 2 kids and a wife and all this stuff?
Right.
So
I also think and I don't know where this came from, but I just don't think it does anyone any good to live in the poor me, I just really don't believe in that. And I say that humbly because far worse circumstances have happened to people, but I always had a very independent, you're not
going to be defined by any
that's
of
right.
That. Yeah. And I think that's the most pragmatic and healthy way to do it. At the same time, I do think as you become an adult and you find yourself in patterns, which I certainly found myself in patterns, both with relationships and all kinds of things. At that point, it's useful to go like, well, why? What is it I'm trying to heal myself of? It is relevant to find out the explanation.
Oh God, it's inescapable. You can't possibly. Oh no, I'm not saying I made a decision to be neutral or happy about it, and that it never affected anything. It affected everything.
I've said this a bunch on here. I don't know why, but I guess it's really key to recognize the difference between an explanation and an excuse. So